Okay, I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday, November 9th, 2021. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Marquis.
Here.
Myers. Sargent.
Here.
Sweeney Moran.
Here.
Zis.
Here. Okay, would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, whoops, my light keeps going off. Am I good? Okay. So we just want to welcome a couple of really special guests. There are newly elected board members. If you've been paying attention to the news, we have here today observing Beth Nizinik in District E and Nicole Rajpal in District B. We extend you a very warm welcome and look forward to your swearing in on November 30th. And also, I just wanted to point out fiscal strength is so important when we have so few resources. And I wanted to, for the I don't know how many times we've gotten this, but our budget team has yet again been recognized by a panel of independent reviewers and has been awarded the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award from Government Finance Officers Association for this fiscal period. And as you know, one of the main jobs of the board is the budget and making sure that we're fiscally sound so we can continue to provide services for our students. So thank you again to the budget team for always doing such an amazing job. Okay, so our first item is the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Board President Marquis, board members. It's so good to see you all. Welcome to Beth and Nicole, and we look forward to working with you all. Several updates for the board and the community. I wanted to start by addressing the canceling of school this Friday. Board members, as you know, we communicated to our families on Friday, letting them know that because of a lack of substitutes in classes that would be uncovered, we were going to have to cancel school classes on Friday. We will still be open. Folks will still be working. Want to just acknowledge and recognize the challenge this poses for many of our families. These are agonizing decisions. Anytime we have to not have school is something that is incredibly difficult for me personally, just to be very clear. And whether it's staffing related, pandemic related, snow related, we do everything in our power to make sure that we are keeping our promise to our kids and community by having school. And so certainly Friday posed some challenges that we just couldn't overcome. We're not alone, as I'm sure you've seen. Adams 12 and then just most recently Adams 14 are facing some of the similar issues. We're committed to continuing to work on making sure that we have more substitutes and looking at our calendar to prevent these types of issues in the future. And just want to once again thank everybody in our schools, teachers, staff, principals. This has been just an incredibly challenging year for everyone, and just want to take this opportunity to thank all of our people for all that they've done to keep us in school as much as we've been in school up to this point. And I think that that is something that I don't want us to take for granted, that the leadership of this board, making sure that we have very strong protocols in place to prevent the spread of COVID in our schools has allowed us to really limit quarantines and keep kids in school. And so I just want to thank folks that have been helping us with that. So I want to thank board members who've been joining me over the past several weeks. I've been to 10 elementary schools, really digging in, thanking our people, listening to teachers as they share with us things that are going well and opportunities for improvement. I've been to Bear Creek, Cole, Whittier, Monarch K8, Crestview, Douglas, Flatirons, Community Montessori, and Ryan. And I will continue these visits through the months of November, December, January. And as we hit February, we'll start to figure out how we're going to get into some of our secondary schools. The format has been really easy. We sit down and we talk, and we've learned so much. I want to thank our Deputy Superintendent, Laura De La Cruz, for joining us on those visits, where we're really adjusting and improving in real time the things that we're trying to do to create the ideal conditions for teaching and learning in our schools for our teachers and for our kids. It's just been incredibly rewarding, and so I want to thank board members who have been joining me on these visits. I think that it's really just great dialogue to hear and gain understanding on how things are working, right? You hear things very much at the visionary level at the board, especially as we present, and to see how things are being implemented and watching how we react to that, I think is super powerful. So I appreciate you all joining me on this. So we had a couple of Boulder High School students honored by their neighborhood yesterday, and I really just wanted to highlight this. So yesterday, members of the Goss Grove neighborhood came to Boulder to thank two of our students, Gia and Diana, who a little time back came to the aid of a woman who fell, providing her care and support in the final moments of her life. They're not only getting framed letters from their neighbors, being honored by Boulder City Council tonight. And just to give you an idea of the heart of these girls, they returned to the home where the tragedy unfolded to deliver flowers to the woman's husband and provided white roses for students to place in memory of her. Just a great example of how amazing our kids are here in Bvsd, and just very, very thankful, and wanted to highlight them this evening. Two other updates, board members. In honor of National STEM Day, the Denver Broncos came to Centaurus High School yesterday. I'm not sure if you saw some of the posts on social media about that. They presented the school's physics club with a $1,108 check because National STEM Day is on November 11th or 11/08. That was pretty good. Students. There was the cheerleaders, Miles the mascot, other Denver Broncos gave a tour of the incredible engineering lab at Centaurus High, where students will be working on their third payload into space as part of one of their project-based learning projects. And donation was part of the Broncos Tackle STEM initiative, aims to bring attention to efforts to increase STEM education. So thank you, Denver Broncos, and for those who participated yesterday. Finally, board members, I know that we sent this information out to our employees recently, and I know that you're aware of this, but I wanted to share this with you in public. We have talked over the past several years, and the board provided a budget to implement a new ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System. I'm here to tell you this evening that our implementation is being delayed by several months. As we've shared previously, this is the newest version of our current ERP, which is Infor, and it's going to help us modernize many of the tasks that impact our business service, human resources team, that ultimately impact our schools on how well we're able to manage those transactions around people and money, and that impacts our schools. I want to really just take this time to thank our team who's been working tirelessly to begin to implement this ERP system. I think I shared in many of the presentations, board members, what a complex thing this is to do. In addition to managing a pandemic and doing the other things, there's certainly a tremendous lift for our team. We've decided to move the launch from the end of winter break to the end of spring break to give our team a few more months to make sure that when we roll it out, we're set up for success, and moving the data over accurately and creating the systems that we need to do. And we're also going to use that time to provide additional training and support to make this transition as smooth as possible. We don't feel like we lose out much from moving from winter break to spring break, which is why we've made that decision. It still gives us plenty of time before the start of the fiscal year, July 1. And so just wanted to share that information publicly. I know our staff knows, our team knows, but wanted to make sure that you all knew as well. And that's all I have this evening for my comments.
Okay, any questions for Dr. Anderson? Richard?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Just a couple of questions, especially around the school closure on Friday. it appears like the teachers are the largest group that are missing, I guess, missing in action. But what does the bus driving situation look like, and also other classified staff situations? And then, what is it that we can do to prevent this from happening again?
Thank you, Richard. I think those are really good questions. I would say that the biggest hurdle we were trying to leap over was the uncovered classrooms. At Friday, when we made the call, over 200 classrooms would have been left uncovered. I do think that we did have employees taking off in all ranks, whether it's principals, bus drivers, food service workers. I think there were some, but it was really the uncovered classrooms, which was really tough because we just didn't have the substitutes, and there was some substitutes who were going to not be working that day either. So I do think that this is something that's certainly a priority for us as we move forward to revisit potentially some of the processes we use in looking at calendars, certainly having conversations with BVEA to proactively think about what it is that we need to do, what other things could we have done, and so those conversations will be ongoing, and certainly we'll keep the board apprised of those things or any changes or suggestions that we might want to make to policy or to any of our agreements.
Thank you. Just another quick question, and that's the school visits that you've been making. I have not been able to attend one. Okay, I was scheduled for a couple, but one of them got canceled. Are you going to go back to the Eastern County to visit, like maybe Pioneer, Sanchez, or even some of the other bilingual schools like St. Columbine, or have those already been done?
No. I still have a lot of schools to visit, and there's lots of schools in the eastern part of the county that haven't been to Pioneer or Columbine or Sanchez.
So can I go into that little thing that you have on there so I can put my name on some of those schools?
I will have a sign-up genius sent out for second semester once our new board members are onboarded so that they too can take part in these.
Thank you very much. And are we going to get some kind of report back on what are the general themes, that kind of stuff that you're finding out with your school visits?
I would say that at this point, the reporting out that we've been doing has been mainly to our cabinet, and we've been really creating to-do lists based on the school visits. And so, but we could certainly talk about some of the themes that are emerging. Happy to do that. It's interesting as you go to different schools, different decisions that this board makes, that staff makes, impact schools differently. And so maybe it would be after we get through all the visits, if we wanted to have a discussion on that, I think that might be something we could certainly do.
I'd like to see that. That'd be great. Thank you.
I have two questions about Friday. So first, I'm wondering for our hourly staff that wouldn't be used because we're not having school on Friday, are we still finding ways to pay them?
So there's so much work to be done with or without students in buildings, and so all of our hourly staff, we're bringing them in and finding opportunities to catch up on things they haven't been able to get to.
Thank you. And then similarly, at schools that are short-staffed in their SAC programs, beyond the need that parents are asking for, do we have ways for our teachers and our staff to supplement that SAC work to make sure that everybody can find daycare who needs it?
So I haven't heard at this point that we are short-staffed at any of those buildings. But certainly I think that as we think about some of the roles of some of our paraprofessionals who serve in both roles, right? So they work during the day during paraprofessionals, and they also serve in some of the other school-age care programs. We are allowing them to serve in those school-age care programs on Friday.
I haven't heard that we're short-staffed either, but I have heard plenty of parents say that they are not utilizing the SAC program because they're worried they'll take the few spots that we have from parents who can't miss work, and so they're trying to find ways to rearrange schedules. So I guess I'm just trying to understand, if folks are listening and if they would like childcare on Friday, is this something that they should be signing up for and we're going to find ways to make it work, or is this as limited as the email suggested?
So we've opened up 14 sites. We have 800 slots. Our plan isn't to grow beyond that, but we have 14 sites all throughout the district, and so I'd encourage folks who are looking for something to go to our website, and 800 slots is we feel like this is a lot of coverage.
Okay, thanks. And thanks so much for these school teacher roundtables. They've just been phenomenal.
I'll just echo what Lisa said. What I'm hearing, the few meetings I've been to, is just a heartfelt thanks from the teachers. They're feeling listened to in ways that I don't think, if you weren't sitting across from the table with no agenda, as you say, that they would feel that way. So thank you for taking the time. I know you've got a lot on your plate, but I think it's a really good idea to go out and listen to the teachers. And I'll look forward to kind of hearing the wrap up. I know that we've talked, because I continue to have my concerns about YAGs and all of that, and how they, your glances fit with all our different curriculums, and trying to overlay one system on top of another and still honor teachers' creativity. And so I know we're working through all of that, because we just have a lot of unique schools with a lot of unique programs. So thank you, Rob, for including us and for doing that really great work. And then I don't know, Madam President, if I should ask this question now or during consent agenda, because you brought up the ERP, and I think we have something on consent agenda about the expense of it. So I could. So I'll ask you during the consent agenda, just a heads up.
Any other thoughts, comments? All right, thank you. And I also forgot to add, when we have the swearing in is also when the board will have its organizational meeting on November 30th. So if you're interested in who's going to be the new president, vice president, and treasurer, that will be happening that time as well. So as I am outgoing, my last meeting. All right. So our next item on the agenda is public participation. So yet again, thank you for bearing with us as we continue with remote public participation. As always, you would have needed to have signed up by submitting the request to speak during public participation form that can be found on the Bvsd website, and you would have needed to have done that prior to noon today. So the board respects the rights of the public to speak on matters concerning the operation of the schools. We believe that public comments that are critical of district staff, however, often cause unnecessary harm to those employees and to the education of our students. As a result, we prefer that members of the public share any criticisms of employees in writing with the superintendent, who is responsible for supervising all the staff and then involving the board as necessary. If you choose instead to address a personnel issue publicly, please understand that the board does not endorse the comments of any speaker and reminds all who speak that they assume the risk of legal action by district employees in the event of the affected employees believe that any comments about them violate legal standards. All right, so as always, we ask that you confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Please limit your presentation to 2 minutes. So you'll know when you're at 30 seconds, you'll see a yellow card that Laura will hold. At 10 seconds, you will see an orange card, and then a timer will sound and your microphone will be muted. And finally, recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. And finally, if you didn't get to express all of your thoughts, please send an email. We all read our email, and that also works. Okay, so we will start with our student speaker, and the first speaker is Dorian Lancaster.
Dorian, you're muted.
There. We good?
Yes.
Yes. Hi, my name is Dorian Lancaster, and I am a 6th grade student in Bvsd. I want to thank the school board again for keeping me safe for in-school learning. Also, thank you for following the Boulder County Public Health Department's mask order to keep kids safe in schools. It's important to be in school rather than online because it's easier to learn in person. I am very much against this recall attempt because it is not based on facts. According to the recall petitions, Lisa Sweeney Moran, Kathy Gephardt, and Richard Garcia have, and I quote, demonstrated a callous disregard for students' physical and mental health by mandating masks indefinitely and without solid grounding in science. That is a load of lies and fake news. Want to know why? The school board didn't even make the mandate. They are following the order that the Boulder County Public Health Department has placed. This order was made by professional scientists and doctors. The people who started the recall said that the school board members have demonstrated a callous disregard for students' physical and mental health. But I know that the school board members do care about us and will always do the safe thing. For example, they removed all SROs in Bvsd schools and replacing them with school safety advocates. Before I leave, I just want to say again, thank you Bvsd School Board and keep up the good work. And people, please decline to sign the recall petitions.
Okay, our next speaker is Tangi Lancaster, who's been given 2 minutes from Stephen Lancaster. Is Tangi there?
Hi, I was waiting for the unmute button. Hello and good evening. We're on stolen land. My name is Tangi Lancaster, and I'm the mom of 2 Bvsd students. Thank you as always for the opportunity to speak this evening as I'm a concerned mother and voter who lives within this school district. My family and I are still waiting for a public apology from board member Donna Myers for reasons stated at the last school board meeting. Now that the school board election is over, we will continue to have a board majority who will adhere to their duty of following the Boulder County Public Health Department's mask order. So even if a recall election is triggered, and even if the recall petitioners should win over the 3 seats, the mask order will still be followed. So what then is the purpose of the recall attempt? It's worth noting that a recall petition committee member said at the last meeting, nobody wants a recall, but it's the only way to get your attention. Was this a public admittance to the abuse of to abusing the recall system at a cost to taxpayers of nearly $700,000? These people are putting our community through a recall attempt and are taking funding away from our students' learning because they just want to admittedly get attention. I'm very concerned about this recall effort. Thank you, board members, for listening to the experts. Keep up the fabulous work in continuing to keep our children in school and as safe as possible. You are greatly appreciated for your time, work, and dedication during this pandemic. Thank you again for your time tonight, and I hope that everyone does please decline to sign. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Patty Delgado.
Buenas noches, Presidenta Marquez, miembros del Consejo Educativo y Dr. Anderson. Estoy aquí esta noche para agradecerles por su liderazgo durante los tiempos más difíciles que enfrentamos en nuestras escuelas públicas. Quiero agradecer especialmente a la Presidenta Tina Marquez, quien ha guiado al distrito con dignidad, honor y devoción, y por siempre poner al frente de todo la seguridad y salud de nuestros estudiantes y empleados. Presidenta Marquez, de parte de la Asociación Educativa de Boulder Valley, le queremos agradecer su dedicación y arduo trabajo durante 8 años en el Distrito Escolar de Boulder Valley, y le deseamos mucho éxito en su próxima jornada. También quiero felicitar a Kitty Sargent por ser elegida nuevamente a su posición y a las nuevas integrantes del Consejo Educativo, Beth Misnick y Nicole Rajpal. Esperamos continuar contando con el apoyo constante de colaboración mutua de todos nosotros. Good evening, President Marquez, members of the board, and Dr. Anderson. Excuse me. I am here tonight to express my gratitude for your leadership during the most difficult times in public education. I especially want to thank the outgoing president, Tino Marquez, who has led our district with dignity, grace, and devotion, and for always putting the safety and health of our students and staff first. President Marquez, on behalf of Boulder Valley Education Association, we want to thank you for your dedication and commitment to Bvsd and want to wish you the best in your future endeavors. I also want to congratulate Kitty Sargent on your re-election and the new members of the board that will be sworn in at the end of the month, Beth Misnick and Nicole Ratch-Paul. We look forward to our continued collaboration. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Andrea Cox.
Thank you. My name is Andrea Cox. I am a substitute teacher, but most importantly, I have an 8th grade son in Netherland Middle School, a forgotten Bvsd school in the mountains. We're all fully vaccinated in our household. My son's everyday stress, on top of having to wear a mask and not be understood or heard, is that if he's quarantined, he won't be able to keep up with school. It is very disappointing that there is no efficient plan for those students who have to stay home if there is a classroom exposure. Not being able to attend school online to compensate quarantine days is a serious neglect from Bvsd and the system. Bvsd does not accept rapid tests, and we all know by now that it's taken forever to get PCR results back. Testing over every other Wednesday at school is clearly not enough. Back in June, we were hopeful and thought 2021 and 2022 would be a more normal school year, but there was no contingency plan in case things didn't go as planned, as is the situation now. If my son gets exposed to someone with COVID, he has to quarantine and miss school. He's on his own. As we all know from next week's class cancellations, our teachers, from this week's class cancellations, our teachers are overwhelmed with their own classes, subbing for fellow teachers, trying to make ends meet and support their own families morally and financially. It is understandable they do not have time to work with kids who are behind on assignments or classwork because of the quarantine. My big concern is that it's mostly the unvaccinated who are contracting COVID. They are symptomatic, their viral load is higher, thus more infectious for a longer time. This creates a super contagious environment in school. We are in a pandemic. Why don't we apply the same conditions we have for a measles outbreak? Yes, vaccinated people can transmit the coronavirus, but it's still more likely if you're unvaccinated. Why are unvaccinated individuals still allowed to attend school? And I'm not talking about kids between 5 and 11 years old who are just getting the chance to get the shot. My family has done its part. I expect Bvsd to hold every member of the community accountable.
Our next speaker is Elizabeth Fashing.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Just wanted to say that I'm very excited to welcome Beth Misnick and Nicole Ratch-Paul to the board, and I am very happy of the outcome of the election that we will continue to have a pro-science majority members on our board who will do everything they can to protect the health and safety of our students in this continuing pandemic. I also wanted to say thank you for providing the opportunity for students 5 to 11 who are now eligible to be vaccinated to get vaccinated at school clinics. And I would encourage you to have as many of those as possible in as many locations as possible to make sure that the vaccine is distributed equitably to every student who wants to get one. It is also obvious that there still needs to be some more education surrounding the vaccine and also COVID, because even this far into the pandemic, there is still a pandemic of disinformation. And unfortunately, there are members of our community who are choosing to not believe in the science and not follow the guidance of public health officials. So if you do not already have it planned, I would strongly encourage you to plan a question and answer session, perhaps with BCPH and other leading health officials and medical doctors to answer questions that parents may have about the vaccine now that kids 5 to 11 can get it, and also to help dispel the myths and disinformation that are being circulated in parts of our community. So again, thank you for standing for public health, and congratulations again to Beth Misnick and Nicole Ratch-Paul. Thank you.
Okay, is Mark Leslie going to speak? We've had a little bit of shuffling on the speaker list, so I'm just checking in.
My time was given to Brian Coffey. Thank you.
Mark, Brian was not able to speak, so if you'd like to speak for 2 minutes, you're welcome to.
Okay.
Mark, were you intending to speak for 2 minutes?
Sounds like maybe not. Okay, we'll move on. The next speaker is Jack Heimsoth, who's given 2 minutes from Deanna Heimsoth. Do I have that right? Okay.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
According to the CDC, the survival rate for COVID-19 among people aged 20 and younger is 99.997%. According to Dr. Michael Yeadon, the former vice president and chief science officer of Pfizer, who has over 30 years of experience in developing vaccines, such as the new mRNA injection being redefined as a vaccine against COVID, quote, in good health and younger than 60 years, even perhaps a little older, don't perish from the virus. In this large group, it's wholly unethical to administer something novel and for which the potential for unwanted effects after a few months is completely uncharacterized. Dr. Yeadon has stated that it is criminal to push these experiments on anyone, let alone children, using coercion. The normal trial period for vaccine research
Jack, we're having a really hard time hearing you, just so you're aware.
completely in favor of emergency use authorization. Dr. Robert Malone, groundbreaking scientist and inventor,
Seems like he had a bad connection. Okay, we'll move on and see if they come back. Gretchen McLaughlin?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, first off, I would like to thank Donna for her years of service and for supporting parental choice. There are so many parents and others in our community who support her. I am deeply concerned that this school board has not engaged in an open conversation about the risks of COVID vaccines for children. Many parents, including myself, have sent the board, Superintendent Anderson, and the district health nurse lots of information about the risks and dangers of COVID vaccines over the past year and a half. As a former public health educator and special education teacher, I have sent much over the years and have met with district staff about providing full transparency to parents regarding vaccines and vaccine exemptions. One of the most important questions we should be asking is what will happen if we inject our children with the experimental biologics? In Israel, 93 doctors signed a joint letter of protest calling on the chiefs of Ministry of Health, their fellow doctors, and the general public to refrain from administering COVID-19 injections to children. The letter stated, and I quote, "The increasingly prevalent opinion within the scientific community is that the vaccine cannot lead to herd immunity. Therefore, there is currently no altruistic justification for vaccinating children to protect at-risk populations. In addition, he quoted, "We believe that not even a handful of children should be endangered through mass vaccination against a disease that is not dangerous to them." They also emphasized that it cannot be ruled out that the vaccine will have long-term adverse effects that have not yet been discovered, including on growth, reproductive system, or fertility. We've already seen devastating adverse reactions in our pediatric and young populations following COVID injections, including escalating reports of myocarditis, for which the long-term cardiac effects remain unknown. As of August 2021, excluding foreign reports, 444 adverse cardiac events in 12 to 17-year-olds had been reported to zero. Subset of over 2,000 adverse.
Okay, our next speaker is Anita Grace.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I have read that Bvsd has received $41 million from the federal government for coronavirus relief. My question is, what are the terms and conditions of your agreement with the federal government for that money? Are there strings attached, and if so, what are they? I ask that you would please publish the information about the terms and conditions. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Terry Vernon.
Hello. I am a mother of 3 children who are in the Bvsd school system. They are all vaccinated, as according to the Colorado law, the Board of Health Rule 6 CCR 1009-2, which requires kids to either parents to file an exemption if their children are not vaccinated against hepatitis B, DTaP, Tdap, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox. I would like the COVID vaccine to be added to this list so that we can get back to some type of normalcy. It will also protect most of our people if we have an environment within school where most people are vaccinated. And if you're not vaccinated and if you have an exemption, then you need to leave school until this pandemic is over. And I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Okay, our next speaker is Valerie Walsh. Is Valerie there?
Valerie, you're muted.
Okay, I think I got it. The main argument against the proposed recall is that it will cost a lot of money that would be better spent in the classroom. So it seems to me that people who are against the recall do not want to detract from the students' educational experience. Further, I have read that this board has worked long and hard to resume in-person learning. However, both of these goals are incongruous with masking the students, teachers, and staff in our schools. In reading through the exemptions in the public health order, I found this exemption to mandated face coverings. Individuals who are hearing impaired or otherwise disabled, or who are communicating with someone who is hearing impaired or otherwise disabled, and where the ability to see the mouth is essential to communication. This is important because children do not have the speech or language ability that adults have. They are not equally able, and the ability to see the face, and especially the mouth, is critical to language acquisition, which students are engaged in at all times. Furthermore, the ability to see the mouth is not only essential to communication, but also essential to brain development. Studies show that by age 4, kids from low-income households will hear 30 million less words than their more affluent counterparts who get more quality face time with adults. Who get more quality face time. This word gap is not just a matter of hearing words, but also seeing facial movements and cues inherent in the language. If this were not the case, 50 years of Sesame Street would have gone a long way to resolving this issue. We are in effect handicapping all of our children in the county with this mask order. Live language mediated by adults and personal interactions permeated with affect is an essential component for learning in general language acquisition specifically, as well as for cognitive thought development and brain development. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Karen Nicholson Cobble.
The policies that you are basing mask mandates and recommendations for injections on are totally counterfactual. I don't blame this board for that because I know you aren't scientists and you thought it was reasonable to listen to the Board of Health, CDC, and NIH. I do blame you for not doing your own research and blindly accepting recommendations from agencies that seem to have more financial incentive. How much money have you received to mask our children than intentions to protect health? You should know that coronavirus and all other respiratory viruses are spread by aerosol particles which are small enough to go through every mask. It is illegal to mask children. There is no randomized controlled trial showing absolute risk reduction. That is the truth. Masks are a lie. The CDC has managed to convince everybody that we can handle this like we did smallpox, where we can make a virus go away. You cannot make these viruses go away. You cannot stop the spread because that is the nature of viral respiratory pathogens. And you can't prevent it with a vaccine because they don't do the very thing you're wanting them to do. Any vaccine authorized under EUA is only valid if there are no other treatments available. And studies prove that active loading with vitamin D, ivermectin, and zinc is a viable treatment. There is no emergency. The emergency now is innocent children are being subjected to experimentation which violates the Nuremberg Code. As you are prepared to inject our children without parental permission and without informed consent. Even the governor of this state is promoting lying and deceit. It is horrifying. Saying the shot is safe and effective is just not true. It's a lie. Let the record show that you, by refusing to do your own research and by promoting the lies and deceit of the Boulder Board of Health, CDC, and NIH are complicit in the injury of the very children you purport to represent.
Okay, our next speaker is Dane Cobble. Is Dane there?
Dane, we can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. Over and over, this board has been provided excellent information by the public from the most credible sources. We reference the best science, randomized controlled trials, and meta-studies of such trials to show that masks are nearly useless, but they are certainly harmful. And the experimental mRNA gene therapies do not prevent infection or transmission of COVID. We pointed out that the VAERS database shows that COVID shots have caused more death and harm in just 11 months and have all the other vaccines combined over the entire 30 years of VAERS reporting. We have shown you that per capita in the UK, it is the vaccinated who are at least twice as likely to be hospitalized and die of COVID as the unvaccinated. The scientists, doctors, and other qualified parties that we referenced have spoken truth at grave risk to their careers and reputations. On the other hand, criminals such as Dr. Fauci and Bill Gates are making obscene amounts of money by lying and forcing harmful, even deadly interventions on the public. Given that you have had these resources at your disposal for months now, this board is either totally negligent or worse. In either case, you are not fit for the job, hence the recall drive. Now I turn my attention to the putative luminaries of Boulder who have signed their names in defense of this board via the No Bvsd recall effort. Back when I was still a liberal, I worked with a number of you. I was the president of Yes on 2A in 2008 when we worked with voters to successfully pass the Climate Smart Loan Program. After a highly successful but all too short run, the program was shut down by one of Obama's many Wall Street appointees. Since that time, I've seen a slow but unrelenting slide in your ability or willingness to discern truth and to support that truth no matter the consequences. I pointedly remind you that you are aligned with and support the infamous Dr. Fauci. As head of the NIH, Fauci has authorized the spending of billions of dollars on torturous experiments on animals, much like the beagles being eaten alive by sandflies that we just learned about. He also approved murderous experiments on orphans in New York City. Of the 532 children we know were in the study, 195 were dead within 4 years. By aligning with Fauci, you are aligning with Bill Gates, and you are ushering in his deeply dystopian plans. By aligning with Bill Gates, you are aligned with his friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As guilty as Melinda Gates likely is, at least she divorced Bill over this, but you have not. You are still married to Gates and Fauci, and you are ushering in a mass mortality event for humanity. Wake up now, be brave again, support what is unpopular but true, as you once did. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Margaret Selby.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. I'm the mother of a middle schooler and high schooler in Bvsd, and I'm extremely concerned about Bvsd potentially mandating the COVID vaccine for all kids. I'm not debating whether or not adults should get this vaccine, and I am not an anti-vaxxer. I think we can all agree that we all want to protect our children and follow the science, so I'm going to lay out some facts. Based on CDC data, the survival rate of COVID among children is 99.997%. Through October 14, 2021, just 362 deaths have occurred among children under the age of 12 out of 2.7 million cases since the start of COVID in early 2020, per CDC data. 95% of deaths are with children who have multiple underlying conditions, also per CDC data. Are kids at risk of dying from COVID? Yes, there's that chance, and no one wants to see any child die. However, a 99.997% survival rate is extraordinary. Why would we mandate COVID vaccinations for every child when there's such a high survival rate? I am in no way suggesting that children with underlying health conditions should not receive the vaccine. However, mandating COVID vaccines for all school-aged children is simply not a one-size-fits-all health solution. We all know that Pfizer and Moderna are immune from liability if something goes wrong with their vaccines. If Bvsd forces everyone to vaccinate their children, who will be responsible for injuries and potential deaths? Is this something the Bvsd board can live with? Data from the CDC and other sources now show that unvaccinated people pose no more of a transmission risk than vaccinated people. This unproven mRNA technology is starting to demonstrate serious adverse events. The only difference between every vaccine that my kids and I have received and this one is mRNA. There is no one on this planet who can tell us what the medium and long-term effects will be on adults and children, and that is not a risk I'm willing to take with my children. Since there's now clear data that unvaccinated people don't transmit the virus any more than vaccinated people, I implore you to avoid vaccine mandates for the children of Bvsd. Please support freedom of choice when it comes to medical decisions for our children. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Kara Frost.
I'm speaking tonight to alert the public to extremely concerning behavior surrounding the recall. I had no connection to the recall, and it wasn't until after I ran and was lied about and slandered by Lisa Sweeney Moran that prompted me to take a meeting with recall leaders. After all, Lisa used her position of power and her school board platform to mislead the public and slander me. Our school board members are not governing with professionalism or honesty. This is concerning to me and should be to the entire community. Even more concerning than the slanderous behavior towards me is the aggressive, violent behavior our recall leaders are experiencing in our community. The group in charge of the recall is receiving threatening phone calls, intimidation, and acts of violence launched against them. Even if you don't support the recall, we should all be concerned when a group in our community is being threatened, slandered, and intimidated. The police have intervened several times. As the police stated, it is the legal right of the recallers to collect signatures. Even if the community members were collecting signatures to defund the police, they said, we would still have to let them collect signatures peacefully. It's the law. The doctor who started the recall was forced to pull out as she and her husband were receiving threatening phone calls. And Richard Garcia's employee, Tangi Lancaster, was posting on the Nextdoor app, let's go find where she lives. When the recall organizers set their tables up throughout the community, aggressive instigators are showing up and taking pictures of citizens, signing the petition and pictures of the petition itself. This is illegal. We have videos and pictures of all behavior. Several police reports have been filed regarding intimidation and harassment. Please reach out to me if you would like for me to share them with you. The leaders of the recall are unable to set up. One woman had her tires slashed, and all of this is reported to the police. Tina Marquis showed up to the recall table and asked people.
Okay, well, that wraps up public participation for tonight, and we'll move on to board communication. Who would like to start? Does anyone have anything to say? Richard, nothing? Kathy, got anything? Nope. Stacy? Okay, Kitty.
I want to thank all the speakers who spoke to us today, and also
Dorian Lancaster, it's always nice to have students talk to us. I liked hearing from you. And I just want to say that I condemn any kind of violence, any kind of threats directed toward recall organizers or anyone else in our community. That's completely unacceptable behavior.
Just wanted to echo what you said before and say how excited I am to have Beth and Nicole join us here in just a few weeks and how much I'm looking forward to their swearing in. And a bit repetitive from a couple weeks ago, but just another opportunity to say thank you to you. This is your last official real meeting, right? Before we get to say goodbye to you and have some fun. So thank you for everything, Tina, and excited for Beth and Nicole.
You're right, Lisa. I should have said that too. So thank you to Beth and Nicole for coming. I think you're getting a flavor of what it's going to be like to be on the board. And you haven't left the room yet, so I think that's really positive. So I'm really looking forward to serving with you. And it doesn't take away from my excitement of serving with you about how much I'm going to miss Tina, but we're not going to go there because I'm not going to cry tonight. So thank you, Tina. And I look forward to this new board.
Hear, hear. I want to congratulate both Nicole and Beth for being elected to the Board of Education, and looking forward to serving with you for the next couple of years, hopefully. Dorian, thank you again for standing up for your fellow students and for us board members here. I think you bring a lot of light and interesting thoughts to your comments, and I really appreciate it. And Tanji, you don't work for me. I don't know where that comes from. It's really, really crazy. But thanks, everyone.
I don't want my silence to make anyone think that I don't echo what everyone else is saying. So I congratulate Beth and Nicole and Kitty on their election. And I echo everyone else's sentiments about Tina, that she will be missed, and it's sad that this is her last meeting. We've appreciated everything that you've done, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks to our speakers, and thank you for all the kind words. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you also to the community who supported me twice to be elected, even though I was unopposed both times. I think a lot of people didn't even know I was elected the first time, so that was that. It's been really a pleasure. There have been so many different challenges during this particular 8 years. This is my third superintendent, which some people forget. There's been a lot of turbulence with that because those transitions are really difficult. I am particularly happy that there's a group of people that are supportive of the superintendent and will continue to keep him here in the Boulder Valley School District because a lot of change in the top of school districts causes a lot of disruption to learning for our students, and those two things are tied. So I'm really grateful that we'll have stability for our students, and so that was a really good thing. So I made some comments a couple months ago, or a month ago, about a letter we received about a notice of liability and an affidavit and an acquiescence of silence. And if you recall, we were given 28 days to respond to a group and talk about their comments and respond to their comments about how the vaccine is a chip that melds man and machine. And so I didn't respond because I received sage legal advice that you don't have to respond because it has no legal standing whatsoever and you can ignore it. However, we did receive the letter after my silence, and it's just been one of the most interesting things during my school board tenure. And so this gave me a view into what sovereign citizenship movement is. You can go to Google and look at that. This letter is claiming that it says for every emergency use authorized device or product offered, if the claimant libelant chooses to accept the temperature gun, PCR test or other testing modalities, the so-called COVID-19 vaccine, the face mask, the claimant libelant will charge $100 million per acceptance of each device or product as insurance on the claimant libalant's life and for the life of each properties, etc. So it's kind of out there. I mean, you know, this has been fascinating. There's a whole ritual around these papers. They're signed in red ink to be the blood. They use lowercase letters. They need to have special shipping instructions that you can find online. So anyway, I just wanted to close that chapter because it was pretty interesting when I got my first letter like this. Apparently it's not uncommon, and probably the most unusual experience on my 8 years happened in the last 2 months. Who knew? So that's about it. And just thank you so much, Patty, for those really kind words. You're also my third BVA president in my tenure, preceded by Terry Mulford and Tina Mew. And it was lovely working with all three of you. The BVA, of course, is an incredibly important part of our district, and we continue to value our relationship with them. All right, so next we have our first information item. So the first is the strategic partnerships update.
Good evening, President Marquis, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. It's a pleasure this evening to be able to present to you an update on where we are with strategic partnerships. So as you know, strategic partnerships is one part of our strategic plan, All Together for All Students, and represents one of the four strategic themes that was developed with significant community input when we began this process. So when we say all together, I think it's important to acknowledge that that has to extend beyond our staff and students to include parents, guardians, other family members of our students, nonprofit organizations in our community, government entities who are very important partners with us in our work, community members who are passionate about a variety of issues that face our schools, businesses, which provide work-based learning opportunities to our students, and of course higher ed institutions like CU Boulder, Front Range Community College, who inform our work and who also provide opportunities for concurrent enrollment for our students. I think I wanted to call out the word strategic as I give you this update this evening, because one of the realizations I've had as I've been trying to systematize the work on partnerships is that if we fail to be strategic, we really leave a lot of potential opportunity and resources untapped. This is an incredibly resource-rich community, both financially and in terms of the human capital that we have in this community. And in order to really ensure that we're tapping into that, we need to be strategic in our approach. So when we think about what it means to be strategic, one of the first things one has to do is decide what you want to achieve as an organization so that you can align your work to that. Fortunately, as part of our strategic plan, we've clearly identified what our long-term objectives are to ensure that all students benefit from challenging and relevant educational opportunities, to reduce disparities in achievement, and to ensure that every student graduates empowered with the skills necessary for postgraduate success. And we've further defined those long-term outcomes by developing a set of pretty robust strategic plan metrics that we'll be paying attention to monitor whether we're making movement towards those long-term objectives that we've identified for ourselves. I firmly believe that without partnerships, it's going to be very difficult to move some of these metrics forward. So when we think about what it's going to take to support partnerships, to be able to align that work to the strategic plan, it's really about building systems that support those partnerships to align themselves to our strategic goals. And that begins with a comprehensive inventory of our existing partners. It's difficult to systematize something when you don't know who all the players are and you don't have a full picture of who all the partners are. So that's something that's already underway. We've begun this comprehensive inventory of partners. At this point, we have more than 100 partners that we've gathered information on. Now, the benefits of it are that for departments and schools, once a partner has completed the partnership inventory intake form and we have them in our inventory system, my team can support the process of collecting, approving, renewing all the necessary documents for compliance with BVSD policies. Ultimately, we're going to be able to create a list of approved partners that schools know that they can go to without having to negotiate contract details or work out the issues around background checks, et cetera. Quotes are definitely around those words, approved partners. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to call them yet, but that's the concept. Once we have that, we will be able to do a better job of really recruiting partners for the things that we most need. Right now, our approach has been a little bit more random in terms of our work with partners. And there are a lot of partners we could perhaps be recruiting to address some of the needs that have been persistent in our district. For the partners, if they complete the inventory, they'll get communications from my team focused specifically on types of information that partners need. For example, updates on COVID restrictions and whether we're going to allow field trips or not. They'll also be invited to a biannual gathering of partners that'll be hosted by me and my team. And completing that inventory will be a necessary first step in becoming a Bvsd approved partner. Doesn't make you a Bvsd approved partner, it's just a necessary step in getting there. The second thing that really has to happen in order to systematize partnerships is to create some kind of governance structure. So we've created a partnerships council, and I'm really pleased that we've got a large number of Bvsd parents that are participating in that council, several Bvsd staff members, one Bvsd student, and that group has already begun meeting. We've had 2 meetings so far, and their work up to this point has really been focused on establishing core guidelines for partnerships, which we'll be revising as needed. Next steps will be once we have a process to approve partners, we'll be asking for annual reports from those partners that'll be reviewed by this Partnerships Council. And this will be the council that we really use to evaluate our whole portfolio of partnerships and seek their feedback on which partnerships we have that are existing, how well they're working, and identify priority areas for us to strategically recruit new partners. So the development of the guidelines and strategic vision is in process. We hope to have that complete in January of 2022. The next step after that is based on those guidelines will be to create a toolkit for partners and district staff that will have things to support both district staff and partners, such as templates for an MOU, a list of existing partners that have signed MOUs, clear processes and protocols for engaging with new partners, et cetera. And then finally, once we have all of those things in place, we'll be able to take that step of really being able to evaluate the portfolio of partners that we have and strategically recruit new partners that we need. This is the projected timeline for completion of these systematization efforts. So again, by January, we'll have the guidelines and strategic vision completed, looking to create the toolkit for partners and district staff during the spring and be done with that in June. And then starting as we transition into the next school year, to be able to do that work of evaluating the portfolio and recruiting new partners. And with that, I would be happy to take your questions.
Okay. Anyone have a question to kick us off with? Richard?
I have a couple of questions. Thank you, Sam, for the presentation. I really appreciate it. It's something that I've been looking forward to hearing, and it seems like it's nearing the goal line. Just a couple of questions on the, you mentioned 100 already that you've identified, kind of, sort of?
That's correct. So we've had more than 100 partners have submitted an intake form, which means that we now have them in the inventory system. The next step is going to be to actually have a phone call or Google Meet with each of them to go over the information and learn a little bit more about them. And there's a huge range of those folks, those types of partners, from small nonprofit community groups to the University of Colorado.
So how did the community get a hold of or learn about that?
That great question, Board Member Garcia. We have been reaching out through our principals and throughout our department heads in Bvsd to gather the information on the partners that already exist. So at this point, we're not recruiting new partners. We're simply trying to get the landscape of which partners are already working in our schools and in our district. And so we've been asking our building leaders and our department leaders to be the key people who reach out and help us with those efforts.
I guess my question was, how did these community potential partners get a hold of that form that you're talking about?
Yeah, great question. So we had the principals and department heads email the link to the form directly to those folks and reach out to them.
Okay. And then on the inventory, that's the beginning of the formulation of the inventory in terms of the partners?
That's correct.
And what kinds of questions are in that?
It's really basic information. So who's the lead contact for the partner organization, a brief description of their organization, mailing address, phone number. We also ask them who's their primary contact that they've been working with in our district, so we know who that person is. And that's really the starting point for us to be able to contact them and learn more about them as an organization.
Was there a deadline for that?
No, it's ongoing, so we'll be continuing to collect that. I don't think that we're anywhere close to having all of them gathered at this point.
Can you talk a little bit about the district criteria to bringing in partners? I mean, what are they? What's the criteria? I mean, what makes a partner stand out more than another one?
Also a great question, and that is something that we're actively in process with our partnerships council to develop a definition of partner and develop guidelines around what we want our partners to commit to and what we're going to commit to as we engage with those partners. So I hope to have a more definitive answer for you on that once the Partnership Council has completed its work on those guidelines, which we should have done by sometime in mid-January.
Sorry about that. Got to turn it off. Would you be looking at, like on slide number 8, where you're looking at the Altogether for All Students, are they partners that will support the IGNITE portion of the strategic plan, the EQUIP, or the SOAR? Is that kind of like the criteria that?
Yeah, so one of the things that's emerging in our conversations in the Partnerships Council that seems to be a value of the council that will probably find itself as one of the key pieces of the guidelines is to ensure that there's an overlap or intersection between mission, vision, and values between the partner organization and Bvsd. So we'll absolutely be looking for those organizations that we feel will be able to help us make progress towards those long-term outcomes.
Thank you. And you'll be coming back in January with more information. Is that what I heard you say, or?
I'll be coming back at some point with more information, and I'll be working with Dr. Anderson on exactly what the timing will be of that.
And once you get all this done, when will be the actual starting point in terms of, yay, we have partners, here they are?
I hope that it is August of 2022.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. This is really exciting. It reminds me of some of the ROI work that I think we're taking on, because not all nonprofits and partnerships, as well-intentioned as they all probably are, deliver the same results. So we'll looking at how well they fulfill their own mission and deliver the results that they say they're going to. Is that part of what you'll be looking at when you're developing this list?
Yeah, I think the conversation that we've been having in the Partnerships Council is that we want to commit collaboratively, Bvsd and the partner that we engage with, to some shared metrics for what we hope to achieve together as a part of the partnership. And so the way that we'll be evaluating the success of partnerships will be how well that partnership supports our progress towards those metrics that we identify. But that's something that definitely emerged in the council is council members are very committed to a very data-based approach and wanting to ensure that we're committing to some really clear objective metrics that we're trying to reach.
And it seems like this complements nicely your work with community schools, because we'll get a better sense of what kind of partners are out there once we've kind of looked at what the need is and how those all match up. So thanks for keeping us in the loop, and I really appreciate the information.
Thank you.
I had a couple questions and comments. The first is, will there be a way in policy to differentiate between a service provider who goes through a competitive bidding process versus what a partner is, so that, because I think it gets pretty sketchy.
Yeah, that's something that we're working on the language for right now, is differentiating between what's a partner and what's a contractor or a vendor. Because I think that we ideally envision our partners as those folks who are not just contractors or vendors, but people that we're engaging in a collaboration with towards some kind of shared goal. And there probably will be a little bit of fuzziness and overlap. We'll have some entities who are probably both partners and vendors or contractors. But I think the differentiation will be that we'll use contracts for those folks that we're purchasing services from, and memoranda of understanding with the entities with whom we're engaging in partnerships.
Okay. And so the idea there won't be a financial piece with the partners, but there'll be a financial piece.
If there is, then we would want to document that in a contract.
Into a contract.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the competitive bidding piece is so important in this whole process. The other piece is just thinking about the balance of a school being able to access a resource and then the resource being able to solicit at a school, and making sure that principals and teachers aren't overwhelmed with requests, because we have such an enthusiastic and passionate community about how to balance that level of interaction. Does that make any sense?
It does. So partners are not helpful if you don't have the time to actually work with them and connect them to the work that you're doing. And too many partners can be overwhelming. So, I think that it's going to be important for us not just to curate the partnership inventory at the district level, but also to help school leaders navigate finding the partners that are going to really help them achieve their school-based goals most effectively.
It might make sense to even get SACs involved, so that, because I could see where parents might say, well, this partner's approved, why aren't we using them? Mm-hmm. And the school leader can only manage 5 partnerships at a time. And it just might be something to think about.
Yeah, thank you.
So, anything else? Yeah?
Just another comment. There may be nonprofits that, all nonprofits have their own vision and mission and set of objectives that they want to accomplish through their nonprofits, et cetera. And some are really set up to do work around some of the points in the strategic plan, for example, reducing the achievement gap, that kind of stuff. And when you start looking at these particular potential partners, I know you have your own set of criteria and you will have your own questions, but it's going to be both ways, right? I mean, because if a nonprofit has their own mission, vision, and they want something, some support from the school district, those things will be negotiated at that time. I guess I'm looking at, for example, nonprofits that say, I want to close the achievement gap. However, I don't know if I'm doing it because I don't have test scores, and something that maybe they could work with the school district to get some support from that particular department to see if they're successful or not.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And certainly if we're going to engage with a partner, we're going to want to have conversations with them about what they're going to need from us in order to be successful. And one of the things that we've discussed is that we want to be careful not to overcommit and promise things to our partners that we can't deliver on. So we need to be really cognizant of what our capacity is to engage with partners. And I think our MOU documentation is going to be really critical. That's where we're going to want to really explicitly call out the agreements that we're making, the things that we're bringing to the table, and the things that we're asking of from our partners, so that those expectations are very clear and not at all fuzzy.
Okay, anything else? No? All right, our next item is mill levy correction update with award-winning Bill Sutter.
Thank you, President Marquis, members of the board, Dr. Anderson. Let me bring up this presentation.
So you're bringing up the abbreviated presentation, not the detailed presentation that was attached?
Yes, it's only 9 slides shorter than the detailed presentation, but I shall
I want the longer one.
Quickly as possible. I hope you are not lamenting the fact this will be your last tax policy, mill levy, budget conversation of your tenure, 8-year tenure on the board. So this presentation is to provide some information largely to the general public, but also to keep the board informed as we come up upon the annual mill levy certification that happens in December. So first, let's get rid of the little. The content within these slides were provided to all districts in Colorado. They're available, the generic ones are available on the CDE website to help provide consistent information for all members of the state, taxpayers of the state. We have adapted them in Boulder Valley with some of our own content and to edit them for brevity and some formatting. So technically these are Boulder Valley slides, not CDEs, but the content is largely from CDE. So in summary, this school districts in Colorado, based on an interpretation of the statute by CDE and others, began collecting less local property tax for education than their voters had authorized, in some cases for many years. How this came to pass is a complicated story that we'll try to tell succinctly. The mill levy correction is a legislative and legal directive to fix this undercollection of local property taxes for education. And I promise I will not read the slides verbatim going forward. So some quick terminology as a reminder of property taxes and how they are determined. So you have residential and non-residential properties multiplied by an assessment rate. It's different between those. The 7.15 is the current residential rate, 29% is the non-residential rate. Non-residential includes things like commercial and retail properties, manufacturing, vacant land, state-assessed utilities, and agricultural properties, and residential largely speaks for itself. So you multiply the actual value, which is not market value. There is a difference between market value and actual value, but multiply that actual value by the assessment rate. You get the assessed property value times the mill levy, and this is 27 mills, so this is the property tax bill for education. So this slide just shows the split for Boulder Valley currently in the School Finance Act. Our state funding is 23.4%, and our local funding is 76.6%. This is just the School Finance Act. This does not include categorical funding. It does not include federal funds or grants or anything like that. This is just the School Finance Act. But for comparison purposes, the overall School Finance Act across the state in average 60.7% state funding and 39.3% local funding. And that local funding covers a broad range of a minimum of 4.7% all the way up to a maximum of 100% locally funded, as there are some districts that are 100% locally funded by local property taxes.
Does this include overrides? This doesn't include overrides, right?
No.
Okay,
Correct.
just in case there are some people wondering if this is an mill levy override, it's actually just a mill levy. Subtle.
Right, very specifically for the general fund portion of the School Finance Act. So in the 1990s and 2000s, there was an option, there still is, and matter of fact, one district just passed it this last election, to what's referred to as D-Bruce or D-Tabor, which allowed districts to keep and spend revenue in excess of property taxes. Voters in Boulder Valley passed this in 1999. At that point in time, in 1999, the Bvsd mills were 36.75 mills, so they had dropped down to what they currently are. This graph illustrates, and this is from CDE, illustrates what happened when a D-Tabor vote occurred and the permission was granted to keep the mill levy at a certain rate, but then it declined from whenever that vote happened until 2007 when there was a freeze of mill levies. And that gap is what the under-collection of property taxes happened over that time. Next, we have a slide graph that shows sort of what has happened with the state share and the local share since Tabor was passed in 1992, and then all the way through the 1990s and 2000s as property values have risen, and this discrepancy has happened with the mill levies. So how do we fix it? The legislature has taken steps to solve this going forward. The legislature is not seeking to recover local property tax revenue that should have been collected. So I think that's a very important piece to point out, that this is just a path forward and from here forward, not trying to remedy the undercollection from the past. This is a state law, and the local school board must set the total program mill levy in accordance with that state law. This graph shows the 127 school districts that are affected by this mill levy correction. So 86 out of the 127, or 68%, have that target of 27 mills, which is where Boulder Valley is. And then 41 out of the 127 have some mill amount less than that, as they will either be fully funded with something less than that. So the other districts, the difference between 127 and 178 districts in the state, are either currently at 27 mills. So for example, our friends just to the east, Adams 12, have been at 27 mills. And then there are some districts that are fully funded currently and won't need to, can't raise their mill levies any higher. So certification of temporary tax credits. So in December of 2020, last year, districts, if required, included a temporary tax credit on their property tax mills. And so this is an example of a Boulder Valley real estate property tax notice. and it clearly shows this mill levy credit. This has been used in multiple situations throughout the years by various taxing entities. I just want to point out that the 48.393 mills for Boulder Valley is not this general fund piece exclusively. This also includes those local mill levy overrides, as well as credits and abatements and bond revenues for bond payments. So currently our total program mill levy is 25.023. We have 27 mills as a target with a temporary tax credit of 1.977. In March of 2021, the CDE was required to implement this correction plan as quickly as possible, quote unquote, by no more than 1 mill each property tax year. So there was a interrogatory that the Colorado Supreme Court ruled in favor of, that this is a constitutional change to statute, and it was signed into law. So House Bill 211164 requires CDE to implement this. And so, as I stated, that mill levy target of 27 mills for Boulder Valley is based on these requirements. So this is just a chart that shows what will happen. And I included the 2019 tax year collected in 2020 just to show that the certified mills of 25.023 with no tax credit shifted to 27 mills with a temporary tax credit of 1.977, and then that total net mill stayed the same, it's 25.023. We'll go up by 1 mill in December of 21 for collection in 22 to 26.023, and then after 1 more year be at the 27 requirement. So where will the money go? The estimate that is in the current year will be about $90 million in additional local share that will be collected, and these funds that will not need to be paid from state sources. So these are resources that, while the local property tax is collected locally, that reduces the burden on the state, so that that mix between local and state share will be less state share and more local share, to the tune of $90 million across the entire state. And so the funds may be redirected into the School Finance Act formula. This is a quote from the statute. But ultimately, this is at the legislature's discretion what to do with these funds. So this is just a chart that shows the projected net additional property taxes once fully implemented. I believe there's one district that it'll take them 19 years to get that fully implemented, because they are under collecting by 18 point something mills. So this is not something that will be completed just in 1 or 2 years overall, but will take a number of years to be fully implemented. So just to summarize, a legislative and legal directive to correct a historical undercollection of local property taxes resulted in districts collecting less property taxes after being authorized by the voters to retain those funds, and is dictated by state statute, not a local decision. It's a phased-in approach. Local taxpayers increasing their taxes to previously approved levels, no retroactive payments, and there will be more fiscal resources overall available for education. And here's the link to the CDE Mill Levy Correction Communication Toolkit that's available on the CDE website, where these slides came from, as well as quite a bit of other information for districts across the state. The end.
Any comments? Kathy?
Well, the esteemed Mr. Stutter, as you know, I'm glad you put the disclaimer up there, because the CDE information was not exactly accurate, but for the overall picture, it's okay. I like how they blame the constitutional factors on their own misreading of statute as the reason that we ended up where we did. And I just, publicly, if anyone's listening, we owe all of this great work to Kerry Kennedy. who figured this out many, many years ago and has been sticking to this issue until it got resolved, even though it's going to take another 20 years. So it was really great work on her part to figure this all out. But I just have a couple quick questions. The 27 mills, that's totally arbitrary, right?
Still what?
The 27 mills is just an arbitrary number that the legislature stuck in there. It doesn't have any reference to whether we're funded adequately, has no reference to anything other than as a number snatched out of thin air that we put in when we did the mill levy freeze. Is that basically accurate?
Correct. It's based on the fact that that is the current highest mill levy application in the state for school finance.
But as you said, we were at 36, and when the School Finance Act passed 100 years ago, we were all trying to be at 40 mills. So it's really just, I just want people to understand that getting to the 27 doesn't really mean anything about whether we're adequately funded. It's just an arbitrary number the legislature picked.
Correct.
And then the other thing is, I think we just have to be really careful every legislative session, so I say this to the two new coming board members as well, because the language written about how to use this supposedly new local money that's coming in that's saving state share, once the negative factor is brought back, the statute's very unclear about where the money goes. And even though it's local money raised for education, I see lots of potential for that money being misdirected to other places. So I think we just need to be really careful, because if several of the ideas that are coming up about how to get rid of the negative factor a little quicker, including the governor's own proposal to pay it down $150 million, which is a nice down payment towards getting rid of it. Once that's gone, this is bringing in significant money, and it needs to stay in K-12. So I think we just need to pay attention to that. Does that sound accurate to you?
Yes, absolutely, especially when the buy down is technically one-time dollars in the governor's budget.
Right. So I appreciate you bringing this to the public. I think it's important for them to know that if they open up their tax bill, they're not going to see 27 because there are the other mills that you've talked about. And another day at another time we can talk about that, because it goes to support all the great programming and buildings and things that we're able to offer to our community. But it comes with a price, which I totally appreciate our taxpayers supporting us for that. So thanks.
Is that it for comments? Kitty?
Excuse me, I have ice in my mouth. First of all, Bill, congratulations yet again to you and your team. Always doing a great job for us. I know you may not know the answer to this question, but do we know why the legislature doesn't want to collect the taxes that weren't collected for the last however many years?
I don't know why that decision was made, other than it would be a large sum of money to go back and try to recalculate and recollect that. I don't know. Kathy, do you know of any discussion as to why that?
I just think it'd be a nightmare. You'd have to go back to each district and figure out when they debruced and how much money they would have paid, and then you'd have to go to your local voters and ask your voters to pay for a mistake that the state made.
Why would they have to vote to pay for something? I mean, I get we're not doing it, but why would they have to vote to pay for something they already voted to pay for?
We didn't collect the money, so we'd have to go back and collect the money.
Right, but they already approved it.
Right, we approved it, but we didn't collect the money, so to pay it back, we'd have to go back to our voters and say, we were at 36 mills, now we're at 26 mills, so 10 mills over 1999, you said, Bill, for 20 years. I mean, I just think it would be a nightmare, Kitty, to
Yeah,
to
I'm
try
sure
to
it
do
would be, but it still is a lot of money that school districts could desperately use.
Well, the other point too is that the state backfilled us, so it wasn't necessarily money that we were out. It just put additional pressure on the state budget, which is why we've ended up where we are. So we were somewhat protected because of the way the statute works, and we were backfilled. So it wasn't, I mean, it wasn't one for one. Some of it, some of it we got, some of it we might have had more if we hadn't had this misreading. But I think that's partly why too, is that we did get backfilled for a lot of that.
That's true. And the other thing I want to say is, I think that no matter how many times we say that we did not raise your property taxes, we are going to hear from the public that we have raised their property taxes. So.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, so our next item is a legislative update, if there is one, beyond keeping a cautious eye on where these extra funds go. Anything else? Yeah?
The interim committee continues to do, let's not put any adjectives there, its work. And they had a couple proposed bills, and I guess we'll just have, before we talk about them, I think we should just wait and see which ones actually go forward. They deal with mill levy overrides, which really wouldn't impact us because we are able to pass our own mill levy overrides. That deals with special education, which I know has been an issue that we continue to care about, and it's coming from a Republican senator in Wald County, so actually is a great starting point to have her carrying that bill. The study by the Urban Institute on the free and reduced lunch, I don't know what you think, Bill, but it has been less than overwhelming, the information that they brought to us, so I don't know where that's going to end. So, so just a few bills that I think we'll want to pay attention to if they actually get out of the committee.
Anything else? No? All right. We don't have much left. Is everyone okay continuing without a break? Okay, great. So our next item is the consent agenda. I'll read off the items. 7.1, personnel items. 7.2, approval of minutes, October 26, 2021 special meeting. 7.3, approval of minutes, October 26, 2021 regular meeting. 7.4, acceptance of donation, Bear Creek Elementary. 7.5, acceptance of donation, Boulder High School. 7.6, Bvsd Boulder Community Health Athletic Trainer Contract 2021-22. 7.7, cancellation of November 23rd, 2021 regular meeting. 7.8, closeout to the construction manager, general contractor, or contract for bond-funded work at the Boulder High School renovations rec field house. 7.9, closeout to the roofing contractor, contract for bond-funded work at Netherland Middle Senior High School. 7.10, fiber optic infrastructure maintenance. 7.11, Infor ERP implementation contract change order. All right, is there any item a board member would like to pull? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve this consent agenda by Kitty, seconded by Stacy? Any questions? Kathy, and then Kitty.
Now can I ask my question on ERP?
Oh, yeah, okay.
So, Rob talked about this during superintendent comments, and it's been something I've just had a fascination with because I cannot figure out exactly what it does except that it's integral to the functioning of everyday life for all of us. But extending it is costing a little bit more money, so I was just hoping we could just talk about that for our public because it's a huge expenditure of our money to get this implemented and to get it implemented right, and I totally support all that. I just think we should talk about that for a second.
Sure. The extension or the cost, the additional cost is essentially for the consulting time for that additional time. We have offset a significant amount of, I don't know, significant, included in the fixed fee contract that was originally put in place was quite a bit of travel, hotels, airfare, whatnot, as a normal implementation would have the consultants come and be on site. And so in the last year and a half, we haven't done any of that. And so we were able to utilize those resources within the contract that were part of the fixed fee that we were obligated to pay and sort of swap that out with a few minor changes along the way. So we have zeroed that out for the remainder of the contract, and I think it's a net $160,000 additional on a $5 million contract. We did put in a contingency when we originally set up the budget for this to ensure that we had the resources available, just like with a construction contract, to complete this. That extended time, it's about 3 months, is really, as Rob pointed out, just allows us to make sure that we do this right rather than forcing it to happen on the original scheduled date of January 3rd, I think was our go live.
Thanks. I know it's a lot of work. I know you guys are working nights and weekends and putting tons of time into it. So thank you for all your effort in getting this launched. I'm hoping once it's done that you'll be able to take a breather and it'll feel a lot better.
Any other, Kathy?
Yeah, I have a question, and I don't know if anybody here has the answer, but it's about the $100,000 donation to Boulder High from a man in New Canaan, Connecticut. And one, I'm just curious why somebody in New Canaan, Connecticut is giving Boulder High $100,000. And I'd be interested in hearing what the RV-12 airplane build project would be at Boulder High, because that sounds like it must be something interesting. Does anybody know anything?
We could circle back and get that information to you.
Thank you.
Kitty, sure.
Okay. Yeah.
I just want to use the closeout of these 2 bond contracts as another opportunity to say thanks to Rob Price and his whole team. The fact that we managed a $650 million bond, and I think we came within every price, within pennies every time, is just an amazing job well done. So thank you. It's just nice to see these getting closed out and to just celebrate all the great work that you guys did in doing that in really challenging times. So thank you.
Okay. Well, should we call the vote on the consent agenda?
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt. Marquis.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Sweeney Moran.
Yes.
Zis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we have our policy study item, the review and study of new board policy GBI, criminal history record information. What do we got?
So this policy is required by federal and state law to address how we maintain background check information. This is really just the straight up CASB sample policy, nothing fancy. It reiterates a number of state law requirements and is part of our Colorado Bureau of Investigation audit that is underway.
Okay, who has some questions around this policy? Remember, it's on study, so between now and the next meeting, which you would vote on it, which is probably the second week of December, right? Maybe, yeah, Richard?
I just have one question. I believe I've asked it before, and I don't know whether it's of this policy or another one before that, but we have families that are undocumented families in our school district. How do we take care of that? Because I know many of them do want to participate in school activities or as volunteers, etc. And if they can't provide government issue ID cards or whatever they need to do the background check, what is it that they can do to make sure that they can still participate in their children's education as volunteers?
Thank you for that question, Board Member Garcia. This policy will really apply to the employment background checks that we are required to do in accordance with state law. But I believe that Mike Grottos might have some additional thoughts for you. One of the reasons that the school district has moved to the Raptor program, which this board approved, was to make sure that parents who are presenting at the door of their student's school and want to volunteer or visit or conduct school business will be able to do that, including families who may be undocumented. Mr. Grottos?
That is correct. The only information left to provide is their first, last name, and their birth date. And that will go through the system to check to see if they're a sex offender or a felon. And so I think that's the best way, and other districts have used it that way with Raptor, and it seems to be the safest and the most non-inclusive or non-intrusive way of doing that. So I think it'll be a good way. So we look forward to that.
Thanks a lot. And I do remember that now, Kathleen and Mike. Thanks a lot for reminding me of it. However, I still need to ask the question again as it relates to the communication that will go out to these particular families. I know that sometimes when they receive communications, they may just get discouraged. You know, if it's not clearly communicated to them, that don't worry about it.
Yes, and we will have that. It'll be on our website, both in English and in Spanish, with the steps, step by step on how they can do that, non-intrusive again, and an easy way to do that. So we're preparing that and ready that to go, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right, well, it's just on study, so we can just move on. And our next item is the 2022 BVSD legislative platform. So this is also on, well, we've talked about this once before, correct? Yeah. But it's still on study. Any further proposed changes? Yes.
With 2.6 and 2.7, I'm not sure who I'm addressing this to, but I guess either you or Kathy. How does this work with the discussion around some limited amount of time of universal preschool stuff that's coming down? I'm not sure I understand fully.
Lisa, could you repeat that, please? I couldn't hear what you said.
I asked with 2.6 and 2.7, how does this platform work in conjunction with the conversation around limited hours of universal preschool?
Thank you.
So are you looking at 2.6 and 2.7 only? Okay, so on 2.7, I think this does relate to the new preschool program, and the issue is not all schools will serve the same segment of kids. And so I think our position would be to advocate for safeguards and guardrails that make sure that because we will be serving those kids probably in a weighted fashion, that we're somehow going to be compensated for it. Is that is that a short way of saying that?
Yeah, I'll let Bill answer more specifically, but I believe it does relate to this idea of the balance between public school districts and private providers who are offering the same services and not having the same requirements.
So the discussions around setting up the new early childhood office under the governor and pulling out some of the educational component out of CDE and also pulling in the Health and Human Services and Office of Early Childhood or child care that exist. It's the federal requirement around special education that has to stay with the Department of Education and school districts. That can't be delegated to another authority. And so the concern is that because there's some language in some of the proposals around parental choice, and if school districts are going to be required to provide special education services in numerous or all private settings, then that will create some pretty significant inefficiencies in a system that is decidedly underfunded. And so this statement is just kind of suggesting that retaining the accountability requirements, and the funding, if the accountability requirements are staying with school districts, then to make sure that the adequate funding stays there. And also the piece about, let's see, didn't I put something in there about the, no, I guess I didn't include it. It was kind of a voucher-esque transfer of funds from CDE or public dollars into the private sector. And so that was concerning, but I didn't include that in this piece. It has just come up in conversations, but it is related to the...
Yeah. I think I get the concerns. I mean, I think we've talked about it before. I'm trying to understand, like, are we advocating for the idea that universal preschool dollars should only be spendable inside of a public school district?
No.
Okay.
Definitely not.
Do you need to include more? Are there some words that we need? We've got plenty of time.
I'm good.
Okay. Anyone else? It's always tricky because we don't know what's coming around the pike and we learn new things every year, but this needs to get wrapped up so you can meet with your legislators, so. Any other comments? Nope. All right, looks good. Looks like we can move forward. Final item, agenda setting. Anyone? Well, I'm not going to be here, but I highly, highly recommend you all think about a new process for the development of JECC-R, which is our open enrollment preferences. As you know, we're given new preferences without much warning, and the board doesn't get a chance to talk about them. We're in a place now where we're embracing legacy admissions based on whether your parents did or didn't go to peak. You'll have an advantage. I think that's not the right way to go. So I hope that you all think about whether that's the kind of preferences you want for all of our schools, whether some schools, and how you decide that. But that's up to you. All right. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Stacy, seconded by Kitty. Adjourned.